Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shiny Show. I am posting this video to both the Shiny Show and ST Crochet Studio, so if you're watching on both, hi, welcome back. If you're watching on the Shiny Show specifically, you saw those disclaimers that this is not my usual posting schedule. I've been posting every day in February to see if there's a better day for me to post and get more traction. Right now it's kind of like early January, so right now I don't really know if there's a better, when I'm recording this at least, I don't really know if there's a better day for me to post, and the plan is just to go back to my usual Friday posts. And if there is a better day, like I would say like mid-February, if I'm seeing that there's a better day that gets more views, I'll start posting on that day specifically. But if there isn't, I'm just gonna revert back to every Friday at noon. But obviously it's not going, I don't think I've mentioned this in previous videos, but it's obviously not going to be on Tuesday, because I have Tuesday be my Book Tag Tuesdays video, and usually Book Tag Tuesdays is at the end of the month, the last Tuesday of the month, but I really try to keep Tuesdays as Book Tag Tuesdays. So it'll either be, if there is a better day, it'll either be Mondays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, or Saturdays or Sundays. So we'll just see what works best. And if it ends up being that Friday is the best day, then it is what it is. So as you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, this is talking about whether or not referring to crochet or other yarn crafts or traditionally feminine crafts, so crochet, knitting, embroidery, etc., is labeling it as a grandma hobby or granny hobby or grandma core, is doing that detrimental to the community. And in this video specifically, I am focusing largely on crochet, although there are a couple of links that talk about knitting that I'm going to refer to, links that talk about knitting a little bit more. But to get into like my opinion about this was inspired by that photo that I showed, where granny hobbies can add up to 8 years of it. Granny hobbies can add up to 8 years to your life, to your lifespan, which great, because I'm crocheting, I'm getting into knitting, so that's like 8 to 16 years. Like, my thing would be like, is it per hobby that you're doing, or is it just that like if you start doing one or more grandma hobbies? So anyway, that's not a huge deal. So for me, my personal opinion is that I've never really thought of it as detrimental. It can get kind of annoying because nowadays, especially like I would say the past 1.5 to 5 years, people have really started getting into it. So it's not really, I would say, like, I can't give exact numbers, but I would say that there's probably a higher percentage now of people of my generation and my age group doing things like crochet and knitting and embroidery and stitch crafts. So it's, I wouldn't say it's like a huge percentage difference between my generation and then older generations doing it, but I have seen an uptick in people of my age doing it, to where it's kind of balanced out with grandma elderly ladies, you know. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's detrimental, and I understand why we have this idea that it's a grandma hobby, because you often see grandmas crocheting or knitting or doing embroidery or stitching something. So it's like there is that association. And a lot of us, myself included, have at least one grandmother who does a craft like that. Both of my grandmothers did both crocheting and knitting, and both of my grandmothers also sewed. My one grandmother passed away in 2023, and my other grandmother, who's still living, she doesn't do it as much anymore. So yeah, I understand where that stereotype comes from. I don't think it's detrimental. I've often referred to it as like, oh, I'm in my granny phase. I'm in my granny era, grandma era. More recently, not necessarily because of this phrase, but just because of how much I love Wallace and Gromit, I've been referring to it as I'm in my Gromit era, even though I'm not really knitting as much, even though I'm trying to learn how to knit. I know like the very basics of it, but at the end of the day, like I said, I don't think it's detrimental. I understand why people think that. And there are a lot of people, no matter what your age range is, who cannot do these things due to whatever limitations. So I don't think it's detrimental, although I do think it can be very annoying if you hear someone saying like, oh, that's such a cute granny hobby, that's such a cute grandma core, stuff like that. So I have 3 articles, one from Medium, one from Southern Living, and one from Knit and Gather, that I'm going to read through briefly, and then I have 2 Reddits that I'm going to go through just to kind of buffer this out and to kind of see to kind of see if I agree or disagree, or if I can flesh out my own opinion, because that's sometimes what happens in these videos, where it's like my own, like it helps flesh out my own opinions and thoughts on the subject, on whatever subject I'm talking about. So that's what we're gonna do here. I am gonna read the articles a little bit more, just because this is such an interesting conversation to have. So looking at Medium, it's From Scrolling to Crocheting, Embracing the Grandma Hobby Revolution. This is by Knitted Freshly. This is from October of 2025. And then I'm going to read a little bit verbatim, but I'm not going to read everything. So, let's see. Where am I? Okay, there I am. It is usually said grandma hobbies lead to a longer life, and honestly I believe it now, especially when I see myself constantly thinking about what I can make next. In a world where we're endlessly plugged into screen dramas, chasing deadlines, and scrolling through reels, I crave something softer, slower, and more real and personal. Recently, the internet has been buzzing with something beautiful, i.e. the celebration of grandma's hobbies, and honestly that's when I picked up a crochet hook and unknowingly began a quiet revolution in my life. Seeing the first few pieces come together felt like a mini victory, proof that something small and imperfect could lead to something meaningful. The science behind crocheting is not just creating items, it's about creating a healthier, happier you. Crocheting can reduce anxiety and depression. Yeah, I agree about that. Like, usually, if I'm feeling more anxious, I can 100% turn to crocheting and to just chill out my mind. Like, okay, I just need to focus on the pattern and the stitches. Like, that's all I need to do. Crocheting can reduce anxiety and depression, lower blood pressure, and improve motor skills. Studies have also shown that repetitive motions activate the same neural pathways as meditation and help individuals to release dopamine and serotonin. The rhythm, the repetition, the tactile sensation, it's mindfulness in motion. Thus, crochet became my way to unplug from the world and plug into myself. And then for the section, debunking myths of the grandma hobby. We've been taught to see these crafts. We've been taught to see crafts like knitting, gardening, baking, and baking as outdated things women did before Instagram and AI took over. But now these once dismissed hobbies are being reclaimed as acts of self-care, sustainable presence, and purpose. I proudly say I crochet like grandma, and I love it. In fact, I believe grandma's hobbies are the new wellness rituals we desperately need. It's about reclaiming slow living in a fast world. It's about choosing creation over consumption and mindfulness over mindlessness. So, yeah, I definitely agree. I like words. Jeez. I definitely agree. It's about checking into yourself and learning to be okay with yourself in a way. And like that might seem a little too deep for something as basic as crocheting and knitting. But oftentimes, like, there will be moments where I make a slight mistake in a crochet pattern and I'm just like, crap, what the fuck did I just do? And it's like, wait a second, it's okay. And something I like referring to, I think it's an Irish tradition with crocheting and knitting, where it actually kind of celebrates the slight mistakes in a finished crochet work, because the belief was that your soul could get trapped in the artwork because you have to put a piece of yourself into the artwork, and if you leave a mistake and you don't bother to fix it, then that gives your soul a chance to escape, like, through that mistake. And like I like that idea. And like, obviously, if it's a big project where it's like, if that one slight area where the mistake was made, if that's where the project hinges on, like, I'm gonna fix it. But there have been times where I've been making a granny square, like when I was doing the I've been doing this one a lot lately. Which one is this one? The 112 stitch classic square. I've been doing this one a lot. And sometimes I'll just, so usually with these sections, it's like you're doing 1, 2, 3 stitches in one space. And usually with that, sometimes I'll do 2 instead of 3. And with that, I don't go back and fix it, because it's like, hey, no one's really gonna notice, first off. And second off, I just explain it the way as like, oh, my soul can escape through that bit if it really needs. So, yeah, I kind of like thinking of it that way. And again, if it's like a thing that the project hinges on, then I would go back and fix it. But it is what it is sometimes. So to look at Southern living, grandma hobbies are making a comeback, and experts say that's exactly what we need. Why we're reaching for yarn again, and again, I'm gonna read verbatim bits and pieces of it, just not everything, but why we're reaching for yarn again. These grandma style hobbies invite us to slow down, be present, and find joy in simple tactile experiences, explains Ilamari Vasquez Houston, LCSW, a therapist and clinical director at With an Open Heart in Arizona. These activities ground us in rhythm, texture, and sensory detail, something our minds crave when we've been overstimulated by digital noise. The grounding effect is more than metaphorical. According to Europe-based health coach Ainur I'm gonna butcher this, I'm so sorry. Mukhabits Shanuva, the slow I can't talk now. Again, I apologize if I butchered the name. These slow, repetitive movements actually shift the body's stress response. In functional health, we talk about balancing sympathetic, flight or fight, and parasympathetic, rest and repair systems, she explains. Most people are stuck in chronic stress and mental overload, but when you knit, garden, or knead dough, your body interprets the rhythm and focus as safety. Cortisol drops, heart rate slows, breathing deepens. You're not running from a threat, you're grounded, present, and calm. The the timeless joy of the tangible, you can see the revival everywhere. In the resurgence of knitting circles and community quilting bees, the rise of puzzle nights, the popularity of garden-to-table living. These once humble activities are reclaiming their place as not as quaint relics, but as powerful tools for well-being. Whether you're tending herbs on a windowsill, playing a card game with friends, or stitching something by hand, you're doing more than passing the time. You're giving your nervous system permission to downshift. You're reclaiming the stillness in a noisy world. So, I 100% agree. And speaking of card games, where is this? It's somewhere. So I got this off the TikTok shop just with how much people were like cackling at it. Jesus, Mary Joseph. Okay, so it's the Go Fuck Yourself card game. And I got one of the expansion packs where it was Jesus Christ. And honestly, like I played around with my mom and my sister, and then at a friend's Christmas party we brought it over and we played like 4 rounds of this, and we were all just cackling at this game and having the best time. And it's like, you know, sometimes when you're in a social environment, it's not necessarily that you're going into like fight or flight. It's just that like your reactions are more on and attentive because you're in a more social environment. Even if you're in someone's home, you're still with other people and you're in some capacity, you're in a social environment. So being able to kind of settle down a little bit with people and with people you trust, it's like we had the best time playing this game, and it was so funny because I don't think the friends that we were having the Christmas party with, like, they're not really on TikTok a whole lot, or at the very least they haven't seen this game being played. And so we were just having a grand old time playing Go Fuck Yourself. So it's like, and we all knew it was coming from a place of like lighthearted gaming, because it's like, hey, we're just following the rules here. So there was that, and honestly that was a great little moment. So yeah, I think that's gonna become a staple for parties. But back to crocheting and knitting and grandma hobbies. So this one is kind of more, this one article from Knit and Gather, it's more on the nose with the topic of this video. And again, it's from Knit and Gather, is the phrase grandma hobbies, another way to discredit traditional female pastimes. And I think it really depends on the context, because I think it depends on the context of the conversation. I think, and this one's like a double-edged sword, where it's like, I think yes, it can be used to discredit these kinds of pastimes, but at the same time, it's context of the conversation, of tone, of implied stuff. So it really depends on who you're talking to, the context of the conversation. Let's read a little bit, like I said, like I've done with the other two, just reading bits and pieces verbatim, putting in my own 2 cents. A lot of creators in my corner of the internet have been clinging to and embracing the grandma hobby label and wearing it as a badge of pride, riding the trend to make viral content of knitting and sewing and crocheting. These hobbies are often slow-paced, practical, and maybe traditional seen as uncool or even boring. But not everyone wants to be placed into this bucket, especially when the term is distilled into its very basic essence by lazy news outlets as a millennia trend for fall. Queer non-binary fiber-artist Louise at Lou-Dangit on Instagram, DANGIT, recently made an extremely impactful reel about how Good Morning America used 2 of their videos in a segment about the rise of grandmacore. They were offended because not only were the quotes from the videos taken out of contexts, Good Morning America was given permission to use the videos, but taken out of context, they were placed in a misguided bubble of cutesy and quirky They were placed in a misguided bubble of a cutesy and quirky new trend. This is not to say that grandmas aren't amazing, admirable, and incredibly skilled craftspeople, but what this does is strip any tradition, value, or skill from the fiber artists and expert crafters who have devoted time and effort in order to learn to knit, crochet, weave, or sew. Louise says it perfectly in their takedown of this approach. We here in the fiber arts community are building a space that fights against individualism, capitalism, and the oppressive systems that are keeping everyone down. They go on to emphasize that they believe it is that deep, and I agree. The person agrees. So while many of us do aspire to be more like grandmas, thrifting our clothes, honing our craft skills, canning, gardening, etc., this is not the viewpoint that the mainstream is coming from. Unfortunately, it does look like Good Morning America just willfully overlooked the messaging from most of Louise's content, even going so far as to pluck the quotes, "I'm nothing if I don't make a sweater," out of a video in which Louise is exploring the relationship between knitting and mental health. This struck a particularly recognizable chord with me as someone who has tied their worth to productivity for a long time, a sometimes inescapable symptom of late-stage capitalism, which I agree with. And there was a post, I don't know if I can find it, but there was another article that I was reading talking about I was talking about like productivity and anti-productivity and how we are in a society where we constantly need to be doing things every single minute of every single hour of every single day of every single week. So it's like we constantly need to be doing stuff when we weren't made to be doing stuff every single minute of every single hour of every single day of every single week, etc., so on and so forth. And really hard. I'm trying to find it. Was it this one? I don't remember. I vaguely remember how it looks, but basically, because we're in a consumeristic, capitalistic, overproductive society, crocheting and knitting forces us to slow down. And that oftentimes is associated with older generations who aren't working and have more time. But with crocheting and with knitting and with other fiber arts, we are forcing ourselves to create time to do that, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day. And the same could be said for reading, because on the Shannon show, if you're watching this on SC Crochet Studio, I do a lot of reading and I talk a lot about books. And these same arguments could be made for books, where it's like, oh, it slows you down, it makes you think, and it's not necessarily like, I feel like this argument can be made for books, but like especially book talk would really come after people who labeled reading as like a grandma hobby. Anyway, getting back to crochet and knitting. Okay, getting back to crochet and knitting, and that is basically the essence of the Knit and Gather article. So I want to get into the Reddit threads. The first one I'm going to look at is, why do you think crochet is no longer considered a granny craft? I was born in the late 80s, and I feel like when I was a tween/teen, crocheting or any needle art like knitting or cross stitch was seen as something super dorky and lame that only grandmas would do. Maybe I grew up around the wrong people, but I can't imagine anyone under 40 that I knew in the early 90s, early aughts, publicly professing a love for crochet. Obviously, I am so glad that the world came to its senses, and I see people all the time proudly posting their crochet passion on Instagram and other social media. but I'm interested in the question of how and why this has changed. It's not just crochet. I see people on Instagram all the time sharing their experiences with baking, sewing, thrift shopping, embroidery, gardening, board gaming, and other low-tech, solitary, or small group hobbies that in the past, as I remember it, would have been considered things that only losers with no friends did. I feel like when I was young, the only acceptable hobbies to geek out over were sports, dancing, skateboarding, and music, but the right kind of music. What factors went into this cultural shift? I have some ideas, but I'd love to know what you all think. So before I really read, I think part of it, like I was talking about earlier, is because we are so heavily leaning towards capitalism and consumerism and over productivity, that more people, especially people in my generation, we're trying to force ourselves to make time to slow down. And we're actively aware, like, okay, this is not normal to be so productive, to be buying so much stuff, to be consuming so much stuff. And especially when we hear all the time from our parents, from our grandparents, aunts and uncles, great aunts and great uncles, and just older generations saying, back in my day, like, we didn't have to work this hard, we could buy a house. And it's like, this, we know this is not normal to be overproductive in this way and still not be able to do X, Y, and Z. And so I think it comes from that kind of mentality where it's like forcing ourselves to take a minute in such a hectic world to read, to bake, to do something that makes us proud and has a result and either tastes good or looks good or can be used towards something that tastes good or looks good or makes us feel good. So I think that's a large reason of why we've had this shift. It's because a lot of the times with my generation, it's like we're forcing ourselves to pause and to slow down because going at this pace is not normal. So to go into the comments of this Reddit thread, this one particular Reddit thread, my theory is that in this day and age, there's no shame in stress relief, and that is what craft can provide, in addition to a creative outlet. For me, the repetitive motion of crochet is calming. That too, it gives, like I said, it forces you to pause, to slow down, and to calm down and de-stress. So another person says, for one, things go in and out of style all the time, and handmade is really trending right now. I don't really think that was the case in the 90s. Can't say for sure since I was born in the mid-90s myself. I was born in the late 90s. A lot of technology was becoming mainstream then, and I feel like a lot of trends were more centered on that. Another thing could be that during that time, kids didn't really want to spend as much time with their grandparents as their parents had, and until now, that would have really been the only way to learn. My mom always talks about all the time she spent with her grandma. My sister, born in the late 80s, and I didn't really spend nearly as much time with her grandparents as my mom had with hers. There's also the ease of access now. I bought a book. I looked up videos on YouTube before you either bought a pattern book / magazine or someone told you a pattern they knew. Now there are countless free patterns online and videos on how to make them if you get stuck. And lastly, I feel like there's less of a stigma for young people to do traditionally uncool things. Like in high school, things like gaming, tabletop RPGs, anime are beginning to have a lot of crossover with the students in groups that would have previously never admitted to liking them. I mean, look at all the men that crochet now, even though it's traditionally a female activity. So I agree with all these points. Talking about like the spending time with your grandparents, I think that's really like a family thing, just because I know with my family and then with a few of my friends' families, part of it is social and also part of it is individual based on family structure and what your parents emphasize. Is that, at least with my family and then with quite a few of my friends, we were spending a lot of time with our grandparents. Like my sister and I, we spent so much time with our grandparents and our cousins. But I think part of it is kind of what's not only like spending time with your grandparents who could do that, but also part of it is not always realizing what the interest is. Because if I have to turn my ring light off. If I had crocheting when I was younger, you know, I might not have been as interested in it as I am now. But when I was younger, I got into bird watching with my grandfather. And he had taken me, I lived close to the Sepulveda Basin in southern Los Angeles. And my grandfather took me over one day and he was explaining to me the differences between snowy egrets and gray egrets. And he didn't think I was interested. And I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And, oh boy, I've been bird watching for about 20 years now. Oh boy. About 20 years. Not exactly, guys. So, he didn't think I was interested. And, like, a couple days later, my mom, my sister, and I, we'd gone to dinner with a then close friend of my mom's and his wife. And I was explaining to them the differences between the great egret and the snow egret. So it's like, it's really kind of, like when you're kids, it's like, yeah, they have their own interest and yeah, you get interested in stuff. But I think also part of it is having them do certain things to see that maybe they wouldn't have picked up on their own, to see if that's something they would be interested in. Because it's like, yeah, my grandfather bird watched before he got me into it, but if he hadn't taken me to the Sepulveda Basin, I might not have gone into bird watching, because that wasn't something, like, I looked at the birds a lot, but that wasn't something that I was like actively doing. So it's that kind of a thing where it's like, you do kind of have to introduce certain things to your kids when they're certain ages. So going over some other comments, another person says, perhaps a small part of it has to do with cultural shifts around gender roles. Handcrafts, baking, gardening, being thrifty, all classically in the realm of women's work, and thus confined to the private sphere of the home. We weren't allowed out in the world, and much of the work we did was considered more a lowly duty than it was something to celebrate or show publicly. I agree with that comment. And to go over some others, to go over one other person says, my mom wouldn't teach me how to make a doily when I was 7 years old. Now she requests me to make her shawls and scarves. I was born in the mid-80s. I did learn cross stitch through though, and have made big patterns. If my astigmatism wasn't so bad, I'd pick that up again over crochet. So it's like, and another comment actually said, I learned as a child from my mom, sister, and aunt. I never associated it with only elderly people. Where I come from, it's a family thing and very practical. So it, like I was saying, it's like there are certain things you really have to introduce and actively like teach them and show them from a young age. Because it's like most kids, even if they like the look of crochet stuff or knit stuff, most kids are not going to want to pick that up unless they're like shown, like, and unless you get excited about something they're making. So there's that. And the thing is, I think I'm gonna retract my earlier statement. I think I would have liked crocheting or knitting because I was a very craftsy child and I did like doing crafts as a kid. So because it wasn't presented to me as a possibility, it just never crossed my realm of possibility until recently. But again, I think it's probably for the best that I didn't get it until recently, because I would have found way too much yarn at this point. So to go over the other Reddit thread, and this one is it too sensitive to be offended when random people tell you you're doing a granny hobby? If you're not a granny who loves to crochet, at a gathering today, someone randomly shouted at me and people I was talking to, wow, we have some grannies over there knitting. And I was the only one crocheting and thought it was extremely rude. However, others have told me it was a joke and that I'm being too sensitive. Mind you, I briefly said hello to this person at the gathering and otherwise did not know them. So I don't think it's too sensitive, but I also don't think the person was trying to be rude unless the person was kept pushing the subject and was saying it in a rude or snobby tone. I would need more context for this, but I would need more context for the story, like tone of voice, like did they keep coming back and saying it? And if that was the case, then yeah, I would say it was rude. But going base level, it seems like they only said it once. I don't think they were trying to be rude. I don't think it's too sensitive to be offended, because it's like, I get it, like when you're crocheting and when you're knitting, you don't want people to tell you you're doing the other thing, or say like, oh, what are you knitting, when you're obviously crocheting. And honestly, like it gets annoying and it gets frustrating. So I don't think it's too sensitive, because at the end of the day, like, if you're crocheting, you're not knitting, and if you're knitting, you're not crocheting. So it's that kind of a thing. I don't think it's too sensitive. I don't think the person was trying to be rude. I don't think anyone here was necessarily in the wrong. One comment says, I've been putting off big time granny energy for so long now that I'm just owning it. Heck yeah, I'm doing my granny hobby. Now come have some milk and cookies while I catch you up on the neighborhood gossip. Yeah. Home baked goods, knitting / crocheting, and some neighborhood gossip sounds like the perfect afternoon to me. It's like healing the inner child that didn't get to have grandparents for that long. And for me, I did mention that one of my grandmothers passed away in 2023. My other one's still living. I am very well aware that I was very lucky to have both of my grandparents, all 4 of my grandparents, in my life for so long, because my other 3 grandparents are still alive. So I am very lucky that I had all 4 grandparents in my life for so long, and that my other 3 are still going. I don't know for how much longer though, so it is what it is. Another person comments saying, heck yeah, now if anyone says it's a granny hobby, I get to call them grandchildren. Crochet, what a granny hobby. Yeah, grandchild, granny's gotta finish the plush. By the way, I'm Taiwanese, and Chinese culture, your place in the family says a lot, meaning the older you are, the more weight is in your words, and vice versa. Someone calling your kid or someone calling your kid or grandkid kid or grandkid is usually used to say someone is below you. That would be funny. Let's see. Crochet has become so trendy that it's hard to imagine someone under 30 saying such a thing. I agree. I think we're at a point now where most crocheters, knitters, people who do granny hobbies, we have a majority of people who are younger, and because it has gotten so trendy, it's most of these people too are just accepting, like, yeah, it's grandma hobby, grandma car, no big deal. Like I said, I don't think it's too sensitive, but I don't think the person was trying to be rude. So yeah, another person commented to finish up. Another person says, depends on how much exposure the young ones have had to it. My teenager called it a granny hobby. I think in popular media, like movies or shows, it's still a granny hobby. After I got into it, I think we went to stores together. They did see that more young folks are crocheting now. And, oh geez, I lost my train of thought. Movies, shows, going to stores together. Yeah, okay. I do think it really depends on how much, oh, I know what I was going to say. It does really depend on how much exposure that I've had to it. Like, there are 2 kids that I used to babysit, and the younger one, at one point, we were watching her while her mom went to get a haircut, and her dad was working. And I was crocheting. I don't remember what exactly I was doing in the moment, what specific project I was doing. But she looks over at me and she's like, you look like a grandma. And right now, I think she's 6 years old now. She's like, yeah, I think she's 6 years old. And at the time, she was maybe 4-ish. So I think this was about 2 years ago. 3 years ago. And it made me chuckle. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. And a large part of that is because she isn't really exposed to it with younger people. I'm her main source of exposure when it comes to knitting and crocheting and younger people who crochet. And again, she's like 6 years old, so I'm like ancient in her eyes. So that is the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I'd love to know what you all think. As I said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.